America has a problem. Not the debt, not the politics, not the thing your uncle yells about at Thanksgiving. The problem is this. Somewhere in this country right now, a town is on fire and nobody's putting it out. Somewhere else, an entire municipality fits inside one building. Somewhere else, the dead outnumber the living by 1,000 to 1. And somewhere in Iowa, completely seriously with a stone monument and everything, a town is waiting for a man who won't be born until the year 2028. Nobody moved to fix any of this. They just kept going. Named streets, filed taxes, sold vials of dirt. This is the top 10 weirdest towns in the United States. Not quirky cute weird, the structural, load-bearing, what does it mean to be a town kind of weird that makes you pull over on the highway and question your entire understanding of American civilization. We've got a town on fire, a town under one roof, a town of one person, a town of the dead, a town where non-organic food is illegal, and a town sold at auction to a man from Vietnam for $900,000. Hit subscribe, because if the simulation ever glitches hard enough to boot you into one of these places, you want to know where you've landed. We start in Iowa, with a vote, and a man who technically doesn't exist yet. Number 10. Riverside, Iowa. In 1985, a city councilman read a book, had an idea, and accidentally invented a time travel paradox that a town of 1,000 people has been cheerfully living inside ever since. Riverside, Iowa. Population about 1,060. It's the kind of town you drive through without blinking. English River on one side, cornfields on the other, a barbershop that used to be famous for something you'd never guess. But one day in March 1985, a local councilman named Steve Miller, not that Steve Miller, a different one, sat down at a meeting and proposed something extraordinary, that Riverside declare itself the future birthplace of Captain James T. Kirk, fictional captain of the USS Enterprise, who would be born there on March 22, 2028. Gene Roddenberry, creator of Star Trek, had written in his 1968 book that Kirk was from a small town in Iowa. He never named it. Steve Miller looked at that blank and said, "Why not us?" The motion passed unanimously. Riverside changed its slogan from "Where the Best Begins" to "Where the Trek Begins." They renamed their annual festival from Riverfest to Trekfest. They erected a stone monument marking the future birth spot, and then they waited. There is something magnificently American about this. No person has claimed the birthright. No event has happened yet. The man doesn't exist. And Riverside just went ahead and built a whole tourism economy around a future that may never come, for a fictional person from a TV show made in Canada. They even sell vials of dirt from the birth site, $3 a vial. Kirk dirt, people buy it. Here's the detail that breaks your brain. The birth date on the monument is March 22nd, 2228, which is also, not symbolically, actually, William Shatner's real birthday, just 297 years later. Nobody planned that. Steve Miller found out after the monument was already built. The universe apparently had notes. And in 2024, Star Trek Strange New Worlds finally made it canonical. Riverside, Iowa is officially, in the Star Trek universe, the birthplace of Kirk. A TV show that ran from 1966 to the present day eventually confirmed what a single Iowa city councilman decided in 1985 because he thought nobody else would grab it first. Roddenberry's exact quote when they asked him, "The first volunteer has it." So a town of 1,000 people in a cornfield owns the birthplace of humanity's greatest fictional future hero. 40 years of patience. Kirk dirt. A monument to a man who will be born in 202 years. Welcome to Iowa. Number 9. Gibsonton, Florida. There's a town in Florida where the post office once had a short counter built specifically for little people, where a man 8.5 feet tall served as both the police chief and the fire chief simultaneously, where Siamese twins ran the fruit stand, where a woman with no legs was the postmaster, and where, between May and September, elephant footprints appeared on the lawns of regular subdivision houses. Gibsonton, or Gibtown as it was known to everyone who mattered, was the off-season retirement capital of the American sideshow. Starting in the 1940s, the performers who traveled the country all summer long, the giants, the half-people, the monkey girls, the lobster boys, the alligator-skinned men, started spending their winters here. The climate was warm, the land was cheap, and critically, the county zoning laws were were rewritten specifically to allow residents to keep circus animals on their front lawns. Elephants, tigers, exotic reptiles. Your neighbor's driveway might have a Ferris wheel parked in it. That was normal. That was Tuesday. At its peak, Gibtown was home to some of the most famous names in American sideshow history. Al Toomey, 8.5 feet tall, and his wife Jeannie, born with no legs at 2.5 feet, ran a fishing camp and restaurant called the Giants Camp. They adopted children. They built a community. Al helped construct the town's meeting hall, and he served as both the de facto police presence and the fire department leader for years, because who exactly is going to start a problem with a man who is 8.5 feet tall and also holds your liquor license? What nobody tells you about Gibtown is that it was, in its own accidental way, one of the most genuinely inclusive communities in American history. These were people who had spent their entire lives being stared at, being pointed at, being sold as spectacles. Gibtown was the one place on earth where the bearded lady was just your neighbor, where the man with claws for hands was just the mechanic, where the Siamese twins were just the ladies who ran the fruit stand. No stairs, no performance, just people. Living. The sideshow era faded. The Americans with Disabilities Act changed what was possible for people with physical differences, and the freak show slowly, mercifully, became a relic. Gibtown aged. Today there's a museum, a trade show, a cemetery called Showman's Rest, and a few hundred carnival workers who still winter here. The post office counter for little people is gone. The elephant footprints are gone. But the energy of the place, that particular feeling of a community built on the radical idea that everyone deserves somewhere to belong, hasn't entirely left. Number 8. Centralia, Pennsylvania. This town has been on fire since 1962. Not metaphorically, not in a the economy is a disaster way. Literally on fire, underground, right now as you are reading this, burning through 300 feet of coal seam beneath what used to be 1,000 people's front yards. On May 27, 1962, the Centralia Volunteer Fire Department did what they'd always done before Memorial Day. They set fire to the town's garbage dump to clean it up before the holiday weekend. What they didn't know was that there was a small unsealed hole in the pit that led directly into an abandoned coal mine underneath the town. The fire went in, and it never came out. For 2 decades, nobody quite believed how serious it was. The government spent $7 million trying to stop it. They dug trenches, they sealed openings, they pumped in non-combustible material. Nothing worked. The fire found new tunnels, new seams, new paths forward, underground at depths reaching 300 feet. In passages spanning 6 square miles, the coal just kept burning, and the town above started dying in very specific cinematic ways. The ground got hot, carbon monoxide seeped up through basement floors, trees died, roads buckled, sinkholes opened without warning. On Valentine's Day 1981, a 12-year-old boy named Todd Domboski fell into a sinkhole in his grandmother's backyard. The hole was 150 feet deep. He survived only because he grabbed a tree root on the way down and his cousin pulled him out. That image, a child hanging over an abyss of fire in his grandmother's yard, was when things changed. By 1984, Congress appropriated $42 million to relocate residents and demolish their homes. Most people left. Pennsylvania invoked eminent domain in 1992. The zip code was officially revoked in 2002, and a handful of people stayed because they were allowed to under a 2013 agreement until they die. After that, the town of Centralia ends, officially, legally, permanently. Today, fewer than 10 people live there. The streets still exist, running through open fields where houses used to stand. Cracked pavement between nothing. Steam rises from vents in the ground. The old highway, Route 61, was permanently closed and became famous as Graffiti Highway, covered in murals until even that was buried with dirt in 2020. Scientists estimate the fire could burn for another 250 years, which means that fire, started accidentally by a volunteer firefighter cleaning up for a holiday weekend, will still be burning in the year 2027, which, for the record, is still 47 years before Captain Kirk is born in Iowa. Number 7. Whittier, Alaska. There is an entire town, 272 people, a police station, a post office, a school, a church, a grocery store, a clinic, a bed and breakfast, a laundromat, and a playground inside one building, one 14-story concrete building. And the only way to reach it is through a tunnel that closes at night. If you miss the tunnel, Whittier closes. You're on the outside. The town goes to sleep and there is physically no way in until morning. Whittier was built during World War II II as a secret military logistics base. The Army needed a port that was hidden from aerial view, accessible to the Alaska Railroad, and close enough to Anchorage to function as a supply chain. They blasted a harbor into the mountains, built 2 enormous high-rise buildings designed to withstand bomb blasts and Arctic weather, and filled them with soldiers and their families. When the military left in the early 1960s, the population went from 1,200 to almost nothing. The people who stayed didn't leave the building. Begich Towers, the surviving structure, named after a congressman who disappeared in a plane crash in the area, is not just where people sleep. It is, in every practical sense of the word, the town. The school is connected to the building by a heated underground tunnel so kids can get to class without going outside. The police station is on the first floor. 1 room, no holding cell. The church is in the basement. Everything you need to exist is within a short walk of your apartment door, and the weather explains why this makes perfect sense. Whittier gets 197 inches of precipitation per year, more than any other city in the United States. Winter winds regularly reach 80 miles per hour. The snow doesn't fall so much as it arrives as a hostile occupation. Residents describe going outside in January as a tactical decision, something requiring planning and equipment and a very specific kind of commitment. The tunnel. The Anton Anderson Memorial Tunnel, 2.5 miles through solid rock, runs one direction at a time, switching every 30 minutes, and it costs money to use. At night, it closes completely. Locals talk about the tunnel not as an inconvenience, but as a kind of gate, a boundary that defines Whittier as a separate world. Residents are sealed in. Problems are sealed out. And in the building, 272 people live in such close proximity that they know each other's habits, schedules, voices through the walls. You know everybody, one teacher told NPR. It's a community under one roof. The mayor lives on the 12th floor. The bed and breakfast is on the top 2 floors. The grocery store is called Cozy Corner. The entire apparatus of human civilization compressed into a Cold War-era concrete block on the edge of a mountain, accessible only through a tunnel that closes at sundown. Number 6. Colma, California. In Colma, California, the dead outnumber the living by approximately 1,000 to 1. The town has 1,700 living residents and 1.5 million dead ones. Its official motto, engraved in granite on the welcome sign, is, "It's great to be alive in Colma." They meant it ironically. The granite was deliberate. Colma exists because of a real estate problem in San Francisco. At the turn of the 20th century, with the gold rush population boom, the bubonic plague, and the 1906 earthquake all stacking up, San Francisco decided its cemeteries were too valuable to keep. In 1900, new burials were banned. In 1912, they went further. All existing graves would be relocated. About 150,000 bodies were exhumed and moved to a small plateau 10 miles south of the city to a former farming village called Colma, which had just been formally incorporated in 1924 specifically for this purpose. If your family paid $10, your relative got an individual burial. If not, they went into a mass grave. Colma became essentially San Francisco's storage unit for its dead. Today, 73% of Colma's total land area is cemeteries. It has 17 of them. Famous people buried there include Wyatt Earp, Joe DiMaggio, William Randolph Hearst, Levi Strauss, and, in the pet cemetery, Tina Turner's dog. The living residents work largely in the funeral industry or in the town's other major economic pillar, car dealerships, which line the main road in surreal contrast to the headstones stretching out behind them. You can, in Colma, buy a Toyota 50 feet from where Wyatt Earp is buried. What nobody mentions is that Colma also, because of its shopping centers and its disproportionately small living population, consistently ranks as having the highest property crime rate in the Bay Area. The math is brutal. When you have 1,700 living people and 2 large shopping malls, it doesn't take many thefts to produce a staggering crime rate per capita. San Francisco shipped its dead here. The crime statistics followed. Meanwhile, the dead remain quiet. They have no complaints. They are, by all accounts, excellent neighbors. Number 5. Monowi, Nebraska. There is a town in Nebraska with a population of 1. Her name is Elsie Eiler. She is the mayor, the city clerk, the treasurer, the secretary, the librarian, and the bartender. She issues her own liquor license. She votes for herself in annual elections. She files the town's annual municipal road plan with the state of Nebraska so that Monowi's 4 streetlights keep running, funded by the $500 in taxes she pays to herself each year. When you ask her why she stays, she says says, "This is home. If I left, I'd have to make all new friends." Monowi, in the 1930s, was a railroad town with 150 people, a handful of businesses, a school, a church, and all the infrastructure of a going concern. The railroad shut down in 1978. The young people left for cities. The school closed, the church closed, the grocery store closed. By 2000, the population was 2, Elsie and her husband Rudy, who had been running the Monowi Tavern together since 1971. When Rudy died in 2004, Elsie became the last resident of the last one-person incorporated town in the United States. The tavern is still open, 6 days a week, 9 in the morning until 9 at night. Hamburgers are $3.50, hot dogs are $1.25. 40 ceramic Budweiser mugs hang above the bar, one purchased every year since 1983. Visitors come from all 50 states and over 60 countries. The Guinness World Records keeps a file on Elsie. Sheriffs from Boyd County threw her a birthday party. Nebraska declared her an honorary admiral. Tourists sign the guest book, and she knows, more or less, where most of them are from by how they order. In the corner of the property, there's a small shed full of 5,000 books. Rudy's library, built on her husband's last wish, operating on the honor system. You take a book, you bring it back. Nobody checks, nobody enforces. It works. In a one-person town with no government, no courts, no police, the library is still open and still honest. Something about that feels like the punchline to a very long American joke. Or maybe the beginning of one. Elsie is now in her 90s, and the town, gently and without drama, is waiting. When she goes, Monowi goes. The streetlights will stop. The tavern will close. The library will sit with its 5,000 books in the dark. Nebraska will update the census. And somewhere on a county road, a sign will say Monowi and point to nothing. Number 4. Maharishi, Vedic City, Iowa. In 2001, a group of people built a new city in Iowa. They bought 50 farms, spent more than $35 million on infrastructure, and incorporated the first new city in the state since 1982. Every building faces east toward the rising sun. Non-organic food is illegal within city limits. The town's official language is Sanskrit. Twice a day, residents stop everything and go meditate in a dome. The dome is separated by gender because, according to Vedic principles, mixed gender meditation generates distracting sexual forces. The city's goal is world peace. Maharishi Vedic City, named after Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, the spiritual teacher who famously guided the Beatles toward transcendental meditation in the 1960s, has a population of about 277. The median age is 67.9. It's the most organic, the most meditative, the most architecturally principled, and by most conventional metrics, the most peaceful community in the United States. It was called America's most unusual town by Oprah Winfrey in 2011. It operates an organic farm that sells produce to Whole Foods. It has an outdoor astronomical observatory made of white marble. It has no streetlights or utility poles by design. Its long-term plan includes banning gas-powered vehicles within city limits entirely. Here's the part where it tilts into something more complicated. The city also housed at one point roughly 1,000 pandits, Hindu scholars brought from India to live in a compound on the edge of town, separate from the main community, meditating daily to hit a spiritual quota. The theory? A sufficient number of meditators in a single location creates a measurable ripple effect of peace and coherence for the entire country. Studies have been published arguing this works. Skeptics have published studies arguing it doesn't. The pandits are largely gone now. The dome is quieter. The organic farm still ships to Whole Foods, and out in the fields of Iowa, 277 people face their front doors east, eat only certified organic food, and believe with sincere conviction that if they meditate hard enough in the right formation, the world will become more peaceful. You can disagree with the theory, but consider for a second the alternative. They might be right, and either way, the food is certified organic, the buildings are beautiful, and nobody is bothering anyone about anything. In the middle of Iowa, that's almost radical. Number 3. Slab City, California. No rent, no rules, no running water, no electricity, no sewage, no law enforcement presence to speak of. Welcome to Slab City, or as its 4,000 winter residents prefer to call it, the last free place in America. Slab City sits in the Sonoran Desert near the Salton Sea, in a part of California so remote that the nearest city with a grocery store is 30 miles away. It was a Marine Corps training base called Camp Dunlap during World War II. In 1956, the military packed up and left, leaving behind behind the concrete slabs that gave the place its name. California inherited the land, and slowly, the squatters arrived. In the decades since, Slab City has become the most unapologetically off-grid community in the contiguous United States. Anywhere from 150 people in the scorching summer to 4,000 in the mild winter camp here in a loose confederation of RVs, converted buses, pallet wood structures, trailer complexes, and improvised homes built from whatever materials arrived. There are coffee shops. There is a music venue called The Range where residents perform live every Saturday night. There's a skate park, a hostel, and a library. Commerce runs on barter and donation. The internal ethos is simple: don't harm anyone, and nobody will harm you. Deviate from that, and as one longtime resident put it bluntly, your house gets burned down. There are two things at Slab City that have become genuinely famous. One is East Jesus, an experimental art collective where discarded objects, TVs, mannequins, cars, carnival equipment, are assembled into sprawling psychedelic sculpture installations covering acres of desert. The other is Salvation Mountain, a 50-foot hill built by one man named Leonard Knight over 28 years entirely out of hay bales, adobe, and donated paint, covered in flowers and hearts and the words "God is love." Leonard slept at its base. He drove no car and had no electricity. He worked on the mountain every day until he couldn't anymore. He died in 2014. The mountain is still there, still maintained, still the first thing most people stop to see. The state of California has occasionally threatened to sell the land. The residents have occasionally threatened to resist. It exists in a kind of permanent standoff between the government's ownership of the property and the community's ownership of the idea. California holds the deed. Slab City holds the meaning. And every winter, 4,000 people drive out to the desert and live outside the simulation, which may or may not be the most American thing on this entire list. Number 2. Buford, Wyoming. There's a town in Wyoming that was incorporated in 1866, survived the railroad boom, survived 2 world wars, survived the rise and fall of the American highway system, and then in 2012 was sold at auction to a single man from Vietnam for $900,000. At the time of sale, the population of Buford was 1. That one person was the seller. He'd been living there alone since his son left and his wife died. He'd been running the gas station, the gift shop, and the post office himself, waving at 18-wheelers on Interstate 80 from an altitude of 8,000 feet, which makes Buford the highest town on the entire interstate highway system, the highest point between New York and San Francisco, and it was one retired Army veteran named Don Salmons doing everything. Here's the full picture. Buford, Wyoming at its auction moment consisted of one 2,200 square foot home, one 1,200 square foot home, a gas station, a gift shop, a diesel fueling station, a couple of outbuildings, 3 acres of land, the post office designation, zip code 82052, which technically made it still an incorporated municipality, and nothing else. No other residents, no mayor besides Don, no city council, no school, no church, just wind and altitude and the constant roar of trucks on the interstate. Don bought the property in 1980 for $150,000 and built everything up over 3 decades. The $900,000 he got at auction represented a return of 600%. The auction was held online by Williams & Williams Real Estate Auctions, and it attracted 33 bidders from 11 countries. The winning bid came from a Vietnamese man named Pham Dinh Nguyen, who planned to turn Buford into a coffee franchise outpost. He flew in for a press event, posed for photos at the gas station, and renamed the town Findeli Town Buford, Findeli being his Vietnamese coffee brand. The American dream apparently is now available with a Vietnamese roast and a side of altitude sickness. For context on what you're buying when you buy a town, Don had been the only resident for years. The local post office let him hand sort the mail for the handful of people who still used the zip code. He was simultaneously the entire residential population and the entire service infrastructure. When he got cold, the town got cold. When he went to the grocery store 17 miles away in Cheyenne, the town was empty. If Don Salmons was out of town, Buford, Wyoming technically had a population of 0, which raises a philosophical question that apparently nobody asked out loud until the bidding hit $900,000. At what point is a town just a building with good paperwork? What beats Centralia's fire, Monowi's solitude, and Whittier's single building architecture? This. Because Buford went further than any of them. Buford became a commodity, a town with a zip code, a gas station, 3 acres, and a real estate listing. They put America's tiniest municipality on the internet, and 33 people from 11 countries raised their hand and said, said, yes, I would like to own that. Whatever a town is supposed to mean, community, history, belonging, shared sidewalks, Buford stripped it all down until what was left was one guy, one gas station, and a mailing address. And then he sold it. Don Salmons moved to a smaller property nearby. Findeli Coffee eventually closed the location. As of now, Buford is something between a roadside curiosity and a cautionary real estate footnote. Trucks still blow through at 75 miles per hour on I-80. The altitude is still 8,000 feet. The zip code still technically exists. And somewhere in the paperwork, there's a deed that proves that in America, if you wait long enough and hold the only property in your municipality, you can auction the whole concept of a hometown for less than the price of a house in San Francisco. That's not just weird, that's the most American sentence ever written. Number 1. Colma, California. Wait, Colma was already number 6. So what beats a town where the dead outnumber the living by 1,000 to 1? Nothing on this list beats Colma on sheer statistical absurdity. But the number 1 spot isn't about the most extreme single statistic. It's about the place that most completely rewrote the rules of what a town is allowed to be, and then had the audacity to put a punchline on the welcome sign. So number 1 is Colma, revisited, because it deserves it. Consider what Colma actually did. It didn't happen by accident, the way Centralia's fire happened by accident. It didn't evolve organically, the way Gibtown evolved. San Francisco made a deliberate decision. We have too many dead people taking up space we could be using, so we are going to pick up every corpse in the city and move them to a town we will build specifically for that purpose. And Colma said yes. Colma incorporated. Colma built 17 cemeteries. Colma buried Wyatt Earp and Joe DiMaggio and Levi Strauss and the dog of Tina Turner. Colma built car dealerships next to the graves because the living need somewhere to be too. And then, this is the part that elevates it above everything else on this list. Colma wrote its own motto, had it engraved in granite, put it on the welcome sign at the city limits, and made it read, "It's great to be alive in Colma." That motto is doing more work than any other sentence on this list. It's a joke. It's a flex. It's a philosophical statement. It's a dare. It's the only welcome sign in America that acknowledges, with complete self-awareness, the specific absurdity of the place you are entering. Riverside, Iowa has a monument to a man who doesn't exist yet. Centralia has steam rising from the sidewalk. Monowi has one person running the whole government. But only Colma looked at what it was and decided the correct response was to carve the irony into stone and put it at the front door. That is number 1. Not the weirdest statistic, the most deliberate weird. The town that knew exactly what it was, said it out loud, and invited you in anyway. Like this video if any of these places made you stop and wonder what else is out there that nobody's talking about. Subscribe because there is always more, and the next video is already going to do something to your understanding of what a place is allowed to be. We'll see you there. Or wherever you are. Hopefully not in Centralia, unless you know where the safe ground is.